Hi everyone, my name is Anna Jackson. I'm the Farm to School Coordinator for Oxnard Union High School District, and we are bringing you some distance learning lessons. And I'm going to walk you through lesson one right now. This is from a program called Nourish, and Nourish is this really great initiative that basically teaches food literacy to students across the country, and they have lots of resources for teachers. And so all of this information is available on our Google Classroom. And I'm just going to walk you through the lesson today. And we are available to come be guest speakers for your classroom. But lesson number one in the Nourish series is called The Story of Food. And I've included our Farm to School program logo and the Nourish program logo, so that way you can locate it. It's on the internet, nourish.org, I believe, and it's developed by the Center for Eco Literacy. First, I really would like to check in with students to see how they are feeling today. And I really love this slide from Pear Deck that allows students to share with us if they're whether or not they're in a good space and they can focus and they're ready to begin learning, or if maybe they're somewhere in the middle and something is kind of being distracting, or if they're just really not in a good place to focus today. And this is just a great time to check in with students before we get started, and to help recenter to dive into our lesson, which is the story of food from farm to fork. And so this lesson is designed to give a background and an overview of what food systems are all about when we talk about food systems. So for today, we're going to first learn what is a food system and some key terms related to food systems. We're going to discuss the differences of processed and whole foods so that we know when people say processed food, what does that mean? You get to calculate a little bit of SALT math. We're going to learn what are the current concerns about our food system today in the United States. Then you're going to participate in an activity to demonstrate the difference between processed and whole foods. Then we're going to learn what is a local food system. So sometimes you'll hear buy local, and we'll dive into a little bit more about what that means. Then we have a few slides to help you analyze the difference between local versus industrial food systems. And we have some discussion questions. And then finally, your assignment to do on your own is to tell your food's story. So first, just to open up our discussion today, I would love students to discuss how does the way food is raised, processed, transported, and eaten affect both people and the environment. And if this were a live class, we could actually facilitate a discussion about that. If you'd like during the video, you can just pause it and I'll move forward. I've included some videos, and in the Google Classroom, there is a link to the video itself. So this is a video from the International Food Policy Research Institute to discuss food systems for healthier diets. It does a great job explaining what food systems are. So I won't watch it right now, but you can obviously watch this in your class. And then we have some key terms. So first, a food system, which is the interdependent processes and people that provide food to a community. This includes the cycle of producing, storing, processing, transporting, marketing, retailing, preparing, and eating food. So most of us take for granted how many steps are just involved in the process of, say, planting a carrot seed and that carrot winding up on your plate, but there are many steps along the way. And though all of those steps and all of those people and systems and processes is what makes up a food system. An industrial food system is a system of large-scale mechanized food production focused on efficiency and profit. So this is also referred to as a commercial food system, a monocrop system, and we see this pretty common even in our community when you see acres and acres and acres of just one crop growing in our community. Local food is food grown, processed, and distributed within a certain mile radius. And it's often 150 miles. We're really fortunate where we live in Ventura County because we have access directly to a wide range of crops because we have this beautiful climate, we have wonderful soil, and we're very, very lucky to, we can actually locate a lot of different food items within a lot shorter radius of within 50 miles. We can locate a wide variety of crops. And as you go through the Nourish series with us, you'll start to identify what those crops are. Processed food is food that has been altered from its natural state by drying, freezing, boiling, canning, and other procedures. So a good way to identify what processed food is, Michael Pollan is a big food author, and he describes it when you go to the grocery store. The perimeter of the grocery store has your produce, it has dairy, and it has meat in the perimeter of your grocery store. And those are the items that are typically the most unprocessed. And typically, all of the processed food in a grocery store is located in the middle of the grocery store. That's your frozen food, your canned food, your potato chips, your, packaged goods. Pretty much most of what most people eat all the time is processed food. And then we have unprocessed food or whole food, which is food in its unprocessed natural state, such as raw fruit or unrefined grains, which is like rice. So between the two of these, which is processed? Pretty simple. It's obviously the applesauce, and the apples are considered a whole food. Between the two of these, which is processed? Again, it's pretty simple. The rice, the whole grains are unprocessed, and a box of ready-to-go packaged rice with a little seasoning in it. That's considered a processed food. And so, what we'd like to do next is to compare the nutrition labels between the two. So, on the left, we have a nutrition label for a package of rice-a-roni, and then on the other side, you have the nutrition label for a package of just whole grain brown rice. It's from Trader Joe's. But you can see the calories are similar, but where there's a huge difference is, in the ingredients in the bottom. So you'll see the ingredients on the rice-a-roni package there's a lot of stuff in that little seasoning packet. But you'll notice there's a big difference in sodium. So in the box of packaged processed rice, there is, I'm looking at my computer screen, 770 milligrams of sodium, which is, when it's prepared, it's 44% of the daily value of sodium. So that's like almost half of your sodium allowance for the day, which is a lot. And then if you just boil rice and cook rice yourself, and flavor it yourself, you'll see that the sodium is actually 0 milligrams of sodium. So that's a huge difference in terms of salt. So the FDA has different sodium guidelines than the school lunch program. And so often students will tell us that food maybe lacks some flavor in school lunch. And a big source of that flavor is from all of that salt, which isn't really so good for us to have that much salt. And so, the USDA and their nutrition requirements for the school lunches, we've determined that young people, students growing, should have less salt than what the FDA requires for us to consume in the public. So here's a fun little math equation for you. So as we discussed, the rice-a-roni box has 44% of the daily recommended amount of sodium in a 2-ounce serving, which is 1/3 of the box. So if we know that each serving has 770 milligrams of sodium, how much sodium are you supposed to eat a day according to the FDA? So solve for X, which would be 770 times 0.40% times 0.40% of X. And that's how much sodium you should have in a day. Keeping in mind, and this is just something we like to share, my mom is a diabetic, and there are things, this is a processed food, and this is marketed to be good for her with 11 grams of protein, 160 calories, and 4 grams of sugar. And she has a sweet tooth, like a lot of people do. And you know, it's a chocolate bar with almonds in it. And so she reads this and she thinks that that's good for her. And then I look over here at the ingredients, and I'm like, oh my gosh, look at these ingredients. I don't know what any of this stuff is. This is insane that all of these ingredients are in this tiny little chocolate bar. And I mean, you're much better off just eating a little piece of chocolate, like pure chocolate, than all of these weird chemicals. But this is not good for anybody. Um, it's just not. We wouldn't consider that a whole food. So whole foods are foods in their unprocessed natural state, such as raw fruit, raw vegetables. And so we'd like you guys to consider how much of your diet is made up of whole foods and how much of your diet is made up of processed foods. And those are some of the things that we dive into more throughout our series. This is a video all about why we should change our food system, and it ties into some of the issues we just discussed about processed foods and how they're not really so healthy for us, as well as how our food system impacts the environment and how our industrial system of food is having negative impacts on climate change, and making our planet not very happy. So that's a video again. Then we have an activity where students get to go to Padlet. I'm a big fan of Padlet. And each student is going to be assigned or selects your favorite fruit or vegetable. And we want you to post photos of processed and unprocessed whole versions of that food item. And I'm going to show you guys our Padlet. You should still be able to see my screen, I think. But here is, so I have this link, and you can create your own Padlet, but basically just to really get you guys involved in this process of thinking, like, what is whole, what is processed? You have guacamole. Is that a whole or a processed food? Guacamole is a dip, and it's made of avocados and a bunch of other things. And you can certainly make guacamole yourself, or you can purchase a pre-made version. But when you're making it yourself, you're controlling what goes into it, so you can make sure that you're putting in whole ingredients. And you can control things and the nutritional value, such as how much sodium is in it, and everything else. But for the sake of this exercise, the avocado is considered a whole food. The guacamole, if it was just given to you, is considered a processed food because there was a process that prepared that guacamole. Even smoothies. So when you go to a smoothie store, one of those smoothie chains, you don't really know how much sugar is in that drink you're drinking, because it's been processed and it's being served to you. Versus these are whole strawberries. We know exactly what a whole strawberry contains. And again, if you were to make the smoothie yourself, you could be preparing your smoothie made from whole foods that you've prepared yourself versus going to a store and buying one that's already been made and we don't know what's in it. So this isn't to say that processed foods are necessarily unhealthy. It's a very loaded kind of a word. And so, you know, the guacamole you guys make at home might be perfectly good for you, and the salsa you make at home is probably perfectly good for you. But it's just something to consider as in terms of what is a whole, what is a processed food. But back to our PowerPoint. And so that's our activity. So we would love for you guys to share examples of what is whole versus processed foods. Then we have this video, which we're not going to watch, but it is about what is local food. And this video goes all through what is the local food movement, and this is a great video to watch as well. This slide really kind of shows you the steps of the food system as we know it. So there's growing food. You can see the guy growing his food. Then there's harvesting. Then there's packing. And then there's transporting. Now in a local food system, that's pretty much where the process ends, because in a local food system, that's where the consumer would get their food. It's harvested, it's lightly packaged, if you even want to call it that. Sometimes food is just rinsed off and put in a crate, and you just buy a whole tomato at a farmer's market. But when it is retailed and processed and transported, that also adds time, right, between the time that your food was harvested to when you're eating it. So, that also, and as that time goes on, there is like a decreased nutritional value in the food that you're eating, because the food you eat is most nutritious. Its nutritional value is the highest when you eat it as close as possible to when it was harvested. So having more nutrition in the foods we're eating is another really good reason why it's best for your health to eat in a local food system. This slide, which isn't coming up so clear, I apologize, shows some of the differences shows what an industrial food system looks like. So growers use heavy equipment to prepare the soil, plant and maintain crops on huge farms of monocrops. When food is harvested, farm workers gather the ripened crop from the field using large machinery, harvesting great quantities all at once. Um, Transportation workers move the food by air, truck, train, ship, or barge. Sometimes a lot of food grown right here in Ventura County is shipped by boat over across the ocean to other countries, which means that food is just being transported for a very long time. Processing. Food processors use factory equipment to chop, grind, dry, boil, can, freeze food. You can buy little bags of little baby carrots. Those carrots are skinned. They're greatly different from the carrot that's actually pulled right from the ground. And so that in itself is a process that's happening to, say, your bag of little baby carrots that look so clean and little. Packaging. Workers operate machinery to put food into cans, bags, boxes, other containers for sale. So the packaging products, it protects food and it helps sell it, and that's often true. And as consumers, we are attracted to different ways that food is packaged. And then there is a wholesale component. So wholesalers sell and distribute large quantities of food to stores. Also, what's interesting about this chain is that this adds a cost to every step in the process. So the people who are growing the food are getting paid. The people who are harvesting the food are getting paid. The people who are transporting the food are getting paid. The processing has a cost. The people who are packaging your food are getting paid. And then when it goes to the wholesaler, that distributor is getting paid. And then there's the retail store, which is like your grocery store that you go to. There's a cost in that. And then finally, after all of those steps, the consumer buys the food, right? In a local food system, there's a lot less people involved in the process. It's basically just the farmer and the consumer, which is us. We are buying the food. So a lot more of the money we spend on the food goes directly to the farm instead of all of these steps in the process. So it's just a different model of a food system. So we're wrapping up. So now we can have a discussion about how are the industrial and local food systems different? How are the two systems similar? What steps do all foods go through? And when we say a food is processed, what does that mean? What people are involved in bringing the food to your plate at home? And how does each model of a food system impact the environment? These are things we can discuss in different ways. In groups, you guys can discuss. We can discuss as a class. That's really up to you all. And then we have a really fun assignment. Working in either pairs or in groups, select one of the foods on the Padlet bulletin board that your classmates just created. And we have a worksheet for you to use to design a story that tells the story of your food item. And the worksheet is going to have questions to guide you through the process. So basically, we want you to tell the story of, if you pick a tomato, where did the tomato come from? How was it grown? How was it harvested? How was it sold? Maybe you're picking a processed food item. Maybe you're picking ketchup. And so telling the story of how your ketchup was made and doing that research. And then, so after you fill out your worksheet, you get to create a PowerPoint, or you can write a story that's like a fun narrative type nonfiction story. Or you can create like a poster or an illustration that tells the story of the food you've chosen. And that's your assignment. And to wrap up, we would love feedback if you find this lesson interesting and challenging. Again, we really value our students and what you think, and if you're getting useful information from our lessons, and we appreciate your feedback. So I'm going to just wrap up. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoy lesson number 1. There are several more lessons to come. The next lesson in the series is all about seasonal and local food. Thanks for listening.